All right, so I'm just going to start us off by saying hello. I'm your host, Carlin Sloan, and I'm here at Inspiring Leadership in our online community, and we're hosting the Leadership Spotlight, which is a monthly event where we bring in guest speakers on different topics related to leadership and leadership development. And today's guest, I am thrilled to have author Jeanne Jones, who is launching her new book, which is called Mixed. Jeanne is an executive in a corporate context. She's a mom, she's an author, and I'm going to let Jeanne talk a little bit about who she is, and we'll take some time to let Jeanne talk about her book, and then we'll open it up for question and answer at about the 30-minute mark or so.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you, Carlin. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. Oop, got a little ahead of myself. Thanks so much for giving me the chance to talk about Mixed. As you'll hear today, this was a deeply personal endeavor for me. What I want to share today is a little bit about personal background about myself and my family, insight into why I wrote Mixed, what my experiences in a biracial blended family have taught me about resilience. And then I want to use the 4 steps that leaders can take to demonstrate resilience that Carlin lays out in Inspiring Leadership for Uncertain Times. I'm going to kick it off here with just a little bit about myself using the identity wheel. Some of you are probably already familiar with this. This one happens to be an identity wheel from Johns Hopkins University. Identity wheels can be used to help individuals reflect on some of the many different aspects of their life that have and continue to shape their identities. It's how those identities also become more keenly felt at different times, and how identities impact the ways others perceive or treat them. So you can see here when it comes to my identity, I'm a cisgender woman, I'm a mother, I have experience in a corporate background, I'm able, I grew up in the Midwest. I consider myself spiritual, not religious, middle-aged, have a master's education. I'm 6th of 7 kids, and I'm an author. So that's a little bit of background there. And then This Is Us, and not the TV show. This is the Joneses. We are his, hers, and ours. And I just wanted to share kind of a fun fact about our family. The 2 girls there are twins, have ancestors on one side who served in the Revolutionary War and came over on Ellis Island and changed their names, kind of what you think of as the traditional American experience. And on the other side of their family, they have ancestors who came over from another country as slaves and continued to be enslaved until the end of the Civil War. And my mother-in-law was a sharecropper. So also an important part of the American story. It's quite a dichotomy. So before I get into 2 really specific examples of what inspired me to write Mixed, I want to set the stage and give you a little bit of background. I'm going to share this coming from a really vulnerable place, because I think it's important to call out how much my view of the world has changed and how my experiences that shape my life continue to evolve literally every day. I would say I believed for many years that I was navigating life with empathy and seeking out opportunities to view the world through the lens of others. And to some extent I was. From a young age, I was given the opportunity to have friends of different races, from different cultural backgrounds, and even different countries. And my father was a counselor at Boys Town, and I had early friendships with individuals who had come from, in some cases, really dire circumstances. So despite having 6 siblings and living below the poverty line, I was consistently reminded of how fortunate we were. And most of you have probably heard the expression, the more you learn how much you still have to learn. My journey as a wife of a Black man and mother of Black and mixed race children is literally every single day teaching me something new. Each day, this is really important, each day my privilege becomes amplified, and I seek to view the world through their lens. And my goal is to share this perspective and our experiences with the hope that it will enable important but really difficult conversation about the history of racism in America, our growing multicultural society, and also the persistent socioeconomic gaps and disparities in our criminal justice system. So, okay, your inspiration 1 for the book, I'll call it, Oh My God, We Have a Blonde. I don't know if anyone saw the Oprah interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. If you did, you know that they shared a really deeply personal and hurtful story about the questions that some were asking about their what color their son's skin color would be and what it would mean for the monarchy. And one of the reasons I was inspired to write Mixed was because of the early experiences that we had with our twin girls and the complexity that we've experienced with their identities. You might have noticed in the picture that our twins do not look like twins. It was literally in the first seconds of our daughter's lives that these differences would be called out. I had to have an emergency C-section, so our girls were delivered by a doctor that I had just met 15 minutes prior. And when our first daughter was born, he held her up and he declared, "Baby A." And then literally not even 1 minute later, they were actually born in the same minute. He delivered my second daughter. And this time he said, "Oh my God, we have a blonde." And then he said it again, "We have a blonde." And he clearly was not expecting to see a very pink baby with light blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair. And frankly, we weren't expecting it either. But we began to experience at a really young age that our daughters were having a lot of questions about identity and the differences in their hair and skin and eye color. For example, our daughter came home one time in 2nd grade during Black History Month, and she told my husband that she wouldn't be able to drink out of the water fountain, but her sister would. And, you know, that was such a teachable moment for us. And my husband had to help her understand that, no, your sister would not have been able to drink out of the water fountain. You're both Black. And mixed race children really navigate life having parents who, in cases like ours, where one parent is Black and the other's white, literally neither parent really can look them in the eye and honestly say that they understand what it's like to be 2 races. 2, and in some cases more races, but in our case, 2 races who in America have a past with deep and open wounds that are still festering. Like I mentioned, my mother-in-law is she is the generation that was still sharecropping. We got a long way to go. In addition, just wanted to point out there are really comparatively very few resources available that specifically address the mixed race identity. And this really inspired me to make their voices heard. Okay, so the next inspiration is going to be a little bit harder for me to talk about. It's really personal because it involves my son. I'll call it My Son and the White Nationalist. In February of 2018, my then 19-year-old son woke up in his dorm room believing that this was just going to be any other day, but it wasn't. There was buzz all over campus about a video that had been going around exposing one of his classmates who had recorded a video with other white nationalists, sharing his intentions to be violent and warning of future events that would be coming. And his exact words were, "Trust me, I want to be violent. Trust me, really violent. You don't have to look like a violent person to be violent." And this individual had been violent. He had been filmed at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, committing violent acts with the Vanguard group. And this is the same rally where Heather Heyer's life was taken from her in an act of hate. And many people don't realize Heather Heyer's death was never reported to the FBI as a hate crime. And that's a topic that I do go a lot deeper in the book. But my son was one of many students, along with his Black Studies professor, who happened to be white, who went to the Multicultural Center that day to attend a meeting with the chancellor and campus police. And their pleas to have this student expelled from the school were ignored. And I'll never forget his phone call after he left this meeting. He was at a loss for words, but I, as his mom, I didn't need to hear his words. I could clearly hear the frustration and rage and confusion with the decision not to expel this student. The message to him was clear. His life did not matter. Sorry. So the Newsweek headline read, and I have it up here, Nebraska white supremacist who praises violence poses unique challenges to campus free speech. And then the article went on to share a quote from the school spokesperson. The University of Nebraska can't discriminate against someone for having unpopular political beliefs. So let's just sit with that one for a minute. Unpopular political beliefs. As a family, we had already begun to grow increasingly aware of the disturbing trends in which racist words and actions were starting to be downplayed and normalized. And to hear a white nationalist's violent threats against our son, to have them categorized as political views, and then to spend the days and weeks following wondering, is he going to make it to class safely, or worse yet, would he make it through the day? That it just was too much. I knew I needed to do something, and I had a one-liner on my bucket list that said write a book, and that became a call to action for me. So that's what inspired me to write Mixed. And then let's get into a little bit about what I hope readers will learn. I'll go through these really quickly and then dive a little bit deeper. I really want to, I hope readers will be open to exploring the growing multiracial society and what that means to our future. I want to provide important historical context that we should all be invested in, and talk a little bit about the implicit bias and what we can learn from implicit bias. Okay. We are growing as a multicultural society. And with this is going to come the many combinations of the genetics that the genetics pool offers, as you can see with my children. A Washington Post article highlighting Pew Research reveals that from 2010, that's the year our twins were born, to 2015, those who identified as being part of two or more races grew by 24%. And Pew Research Center provides some additional analytics. Between 2000 and 2010, the number of white and Black biracial Americans more than doubled. The racial background of the largest group of multiracial babies, 36%, is Black and white. And 1 in 7 US infants, or 14%, were multiracial or multi-ethnic in 2015. That's nearly triple the share in 1980. And I am just so excited personally about how much we can learn from this growing population and what their experiences can teach us. And then I want to teach readers about, or acknowledge that we haven't healed from our past. We just haven't. There was a step forward last week as Juneteenth was declared a federal holiday, and there are small wins happening. But systemic racism is all around us, and there should be little doubt that it exists in our country. On the Ben & Jerry's website, you can see here, they do a really great job of breaking down 7 ways that we know systemic racism is real. a couple categories here. Wealth. White families hold 90% of national wealth compared to 2.6% of Black families. And when it comes to employment, the Black unemployment rate has been consistently twice that of whites over the past 60 years. And Black people with college degrees are twice as likely to be unemployed as all other graduates. When it comes to education, Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students for the same infraction. Criminal justice, Blacks make up 13% of the population, but they make up 40% of the prison population. Housing, a recent study demonstrated that people of color are told about and shown fewer homes and apartments than whites. When it comes to surveillance, Blacks are 30% more likely to be pulled over, and we'll talk about that a little more. Healthcare, one study found 67% of doctors have a bias against African-American patients. And I want to point out locally here, our Douglas County Board of Health declared in 2020 that racism was a public health threat, linking the significant differences in health outcomes to racism. And I encourage everyone to Google that. You can Google Douglas County Board of Health declares racism a public health threat. I think that one's really important to take time to think about because it's such a powerful and important declaration that's going to help us move us forward. And then I want to talk a little bit about implicit bias. We all have implicit bias. The Perception Institute breaks down the term implicit bias in the following way. Thoughts and feelings are implicit if we are unaware of them or mistaken about their nature. We have a bias when, rather than being natural, we have a preference or aversion to a person or group of people. Thus the term implicit bias to describe when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. And these biases are all around us and are triggered by our brain automatically making quick judgments and assessments. And they're influenced by our background, our personal experiences, societal experiences, etc. And some examples might include like affinity bias, where you might have a preference for people who are like you. There are gender biases, age biases, name, height, you name it. And in mixed, I share examples of how when implicit bias moves from an attitude into an action or response, it can go from being unsettling or unfair or disturbing to actually becoming physically dangerous. And I posed the question, how is it that one set of human beings living side by side in the same community can expect to have a different experience than the other when it comes to, when it comes to how they are treated by our criminal justice system simply because of the color of their skin. And in my case, 2 human beings, my son and I, who share the exact same, or not the exact same, but we share our same DNA, we're experiencing different realities. And an example of this, in March of 2019, the Washington Post reported on researchers who had compiled and analyzed data for more than 100 million traffic stops in the United States. 100 million, that's a huge data set. They found police were more likely to pull over Black drivers, and the researchers were able to confirm racial bias by measuring daytime stops versus nighttime stops, when darkness would make it more difficult to ascertain a driver's race. So it was controlled for. And as with previous studies, they also found that Black and Latino drivers are more likely to be searched for contraband, even though white drivers are consistently more likely to be found with contraband. And then just to share a couple more sobering statistics related to the outcomes of bias, Black men and boys are 2.5 times more likely than white men and boys to die during an encounter with the police. That's according to a August 2019 article in the LA Times. And that number then translates into 1 in every 1,000 young Black men and boys. And it tragically makes getting killed by police, a leading cause of death for this demographic. And it's critically important that we as a society have a fundamental understanding of the reality of unconscious bias and its implications. And the way I like to view it is, imagine the progress that we could make if parents made an effort, during that same time that they're teaching their children about the dangers of not looking before crossing a street, or not touching a hot stove, or not petting a strange dog. If they took the time to educate their children using analogies and simple things that they can understand about implicit bias, and how it's just going to be a part of how we think in our experiences, but we can control it. I like to reference Vanderbilt University's website. They've got a really nice high-level summary of some strategies to overcome implicit bias or unconscious bias. I'm going to run through these really quickly. Learn as much as you possibly can about unconscious bias and ways to combat it. Tell your story and listen to the story of others. Avoid stereotypes and overgeneralizations. Separate feelings from facts. Have a diverse group of people around the decision-making table. Engage in self-reflection to uncover personal biases. Develop safe and brave spaces to discuss unconscious bias. Be an active ally. Don't expect a quick fix, and practice empathy. And I believe really powerful change can happen if we commit to working on even just one or two of these strategies on any given day. So I'm going to change gears a little bit here and switch to when I read Carlin's book, Inspiring Leadership for Uncertain Times, I really felt inspired and hopeful. When I think about how far we've come with race relations in our country, and how far we've still got yet to go, and how uncertain things can still seem, the concept of alignment coupled with the need for resilience really resonated with me as something that we must practice if we're going to make the kind of positive change that we want to. And I love this quote from Carlin. She writes, alignment, have confidence that you can personally create a more positive outcome, and together it can be exponential. And think of the power in that. You couple that with resilience, by definition, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. I think that's a really good roadmap to help move us forward. So let's explore some of the steps that we can take to practice resilience and alignment as we do the work to address our systemic gaps with racism in our country. Acknowledge the real and focus on the future. It is so important to acknowledge the harsh reality of race relations and consider what can be done to move fluidly from short-term to long-term thinking. In the short term, react, protest, call it out, celebrate wins, and importantly, have those really tough but necessary conversations. As you can see, it's not easy to talk about my son. I tear up every single time, but I got to keep doing it. I got to keep trying. I got to be stronger, and I got to just power through, because it's important to talk about our experiences. And then long-term, elect leaders who understand the intentional barriers that exist, educate our children from a young age about bias, demand accuracy and transparency in our history lessons. And then also remember, long-term will be shaped by the investments that we're making now in our children. And then build relationships and community, encourage others to think bigger. For anyone who doesn't have a mixed race family or close friends or family members who are diverse, be intentional about engaging and building relationships. There's so much to learn from hearing diverse voices and participating in different cultures and appreciating our differences. And join community groups or councils and establish social connections, practice difficult conversations, and then find ways to measure if you're moving the needle and making an impact. And importantly, hold your elected leaders accountable for establishing ways to measure and communicating progress with transparency, or lack of progress with transparency. And then view challenges as opportunities. Let a challenge inspire you to be innovative in how you think. Do what has not been done before. Create a think tank at your parent organization or church to generate ideas on how you can bridge some of the gaps that we just discussed, or start a DE&I group with your neighborhood association. Initiate a teacher's history challenge, and be resilient. Conduct a resilience audit as a check-in. There's no doubt about it. This is really tough work and you won't always be great at it. That's why I wanted to make sure I started this conversation with, I am still learning every day. The more you learn how much you have to learn. And it's okay not to be perfect in our attempts and our efforts, but just remember that definition of resilience: recover quickly from difficulties. And the more you practice it, the quicker you recover, the more engaged that you can be consistently. And then practice physical and mental discipline. Start with maintaining a positive mindset. The great news is that you fully control this. Took me a while to embrace and accept that, but you actually fully control your mindset. Nobody can take your joy without your permission, and you have the power to change it. And I think bias is really key here too, to build mental bias discipline for both adults and our children, and then to also practice self-care. Can't stress that enough. Self-care is so important. And then acknowledge the harsh realities of your role. The unacceptable state of race relations in our country and in our world must be acknowledged. We all have a role to play in making it better, whether we want to accept that role or not. And so I thought I'd close with a quote from our former president, Barack Obama: "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And in closing, I just really encourage everyone to seek alignment, practice resilience, and be good to each other.
Thank you so much, Jeanne. I'm a little emotional after your stories, and I'm just going to post a link to purchase the book right here, so that everybody has that in the chat, because I think what you have written about, because you're really writing from the heart and from your personal experience, it really makes a huge impact. And so it's just really, it's beautiful. And in the context of inspiring leadership and what we're really curious about, we're really looking at how do we build more resilient and more productive and more compassionate workplaces. And I think sometimes we forget that workplaces are made up of human beings, organizations are made up of human beings, and we all bring this sort of huge backdrop of our life experience to the table. So as a leader, how have you really reconceived of leadership because of your personal experience with race relations?
Oh, it's so important, and I'm really actually so happy to see the direction it's going. I've seen organizations sign commitments to really stand up for social justice and be committed more broadly. When you think about the identity wheel that I shared, really engaging more broadly in inclusiveness and having a really great understanding that when you are inclusive and you bring diverse voices to the table, these are things that help you as an organization be more authentic, and it's going to lead ultimately to more profitability. There's all kinds of studies that have shown that. So ideally, you're not going to have profit as your number one motivating factor. It's the right thing to do. But when you do it and you do it well, profit will come. And there are just so many aspects of identity to be taken into consideration that I believe we've lost opportunity with. You know, you think about people who are differently abled, it's so easy to come up with strategies to find ways for someone, for example, who may be blind and visually impaired, to use technology today
Yeah.
to be able to equip them in a role where they may not have otherwise been able to serve. And it's just something that we have to keep at the forefront and do better every day.
Well, this is great, and the folks who are attending are starting to post questions. So I'm gonna turn to one of those questions, which is a perfect follow-on to what you were saying. You said at the beginning that your privilege was amplified by seeing through the eyes of your family. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, I'm really glad someone asked about privilege, because I do talk about it quite a bit in the book, but I did not talk about it a lot today, other than that small mention. It surprises me how every day a new experience that my children are going through, that my husband goes through, can open my eyes to, wow, I did not see that, and it was right in front of me this whole time. There's some of the more obvious ones where I'm shopping with my older son and we start getting followed, or having to have the conversations with your kids that other people may not have to have about encounters with the police and things like that. But there's also small ones that people don't think about. When my children were little and trying to find hair products for them, and having to go out of my way. And now you can order everything online and it's here in 2 days. But there's just so much to it. And that's why I felt like it was really important to share this perspective and really encourage everyone. Not just, I speak to the Black, white, biracial dynamic. Try your hardest every day to live through the eyes of others and put yourself in their position and have compassion.
Well, as a mom, this book really hit me, and one thing that we have in common is that we're both moms of kids who have skin tones that are darker than us, and my kid looks very South Asian, and the eye-opening that happens for somebody who's grown up with the privilege that we have. That's a visual privilege, right? It's a really amazing experience to see through the eyes of your kids, and to fear for your children and realize that that's such a common experience for parents of color who are watching what's happening for their kids and really fearing for their kids. So I'm gonna read a comment and then ask another question from the audience. So Dr. Ramon Pastrano says, Jeanne, thank you for bringing an authentic voice to this conversation. I truly appreciate your vulnerability and humility in sharing your experience with us. And Shannon Luders Manuel says, what do you do to practice self-care?
Oh, maybe not enough. I'm working on it. And that's why I like to talk about it, because I love to get ideas from others. I am working on it. I try to when I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed, I try to take a walk. I try and step away. I'm not great at meditating, but it's something that I've been practicing and trying to get better at. And then mindset. I know I brought up a little bit about mindset. Really have started to move the needle on recognizing that I control my joy and my ability to have a positive outlook on anything. Even when you're having the worst day, your mind can tell you to accept it as the worst day, or your mind can tell you to somehow make it positive, and you control that. So that's definitely my self-care techniques I'm working on.
And when you think about the experience of writing your story and speaking about the story, what did you have any fear about talking about these issues as a white woman?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually had a consultant who helped me along. She's biracial, so she served as both a consultant and a sensitivity reader. And I can't tell you how many conversations we had about, do I do this? Do I do this? What happens? What happens? Am I going to be able to be strong enough to say this was my experience and I stand by it, and not worry about being judged by it and what others were going to think about it? I second guessed myself way more times than I can count. And even up until the day that it went to print and it was done, I was second guessing myself. And then when it went to print, it was, oh, I
Yeah.
did it. There's no turning back now. So.
And have there been any repercussions that you didn't expect? Any reactions you didn't expect?
I wouldn't say that I didn't expect. I was fully expecting quite a broad range of reactions. One that I was kind of surprised about was sometimes a lack of interest where I thought there may be interest. And then the other was after the book was published, the reason I felt it was so important to talk about how much I'm still learning, I learned a little bit more about how sensitive some of the topics that I did touch on were, and probably would rethink that and maybe do things a little bit differently. But that's life. That's how we evolve and
Right.
learn and change. And so I do think when I talk about mixed, it's really important that I share that some topics I'm going to be very vulnerable and transparent with you. I got the feedback that, wow, you really sounded privileged there. And my privilege coming out, it's important to talk about that and mention it, because I'm still learning and I'm still privileged, and it's who I am. And hopefully each day I get a little bit better at acknowledging it. And
I love that you're saying that, because I think if we can actually have compassion for each other, no matter where we are in this conversation or in this awareness, it makes a really profound impact. Because it's when we attack each other that we can't listen, we can't grow, we can't learn. So we have another question. This is from Kathy Hamburger. How can we help change mindset in a global way?
oh boy, Kathy, that's a one. I think I think it's all about inspiring others to want to be committed to do this together. I think about like the United Nations and the sustainability, the global sustainability objectives we have. If we start small with a few things that we feel are the most important and that we can move the needle on, and we can make a global commitment on it and encourage others to have the mindset that we can do it. You think about those global sustainability initiatives, I think no one thought we could really do this, right? And then here we are, we're inching closer. And we're not going to meet every goal, but the more that we can try and find common opportunities globally to do better and to alignment, resilience, the better off we'll be.
There's a wonderful thinker named David Cooperrider who kind of helped create this idea of appreciative inquiry, and how the questions we ask, if we frame them in a positive way, they broaden and build the positive. And so if we're asking questions of our organizations, the example will be, how do you do things well? What's working well? How do you broaden and build the good? And so if we're asking questions about diversity and inclusion in organizations, what are some questions that we can ask that can get at the positive of how we broaden and build more compassionate workplaces that are more inclusive and value everyone So, have you thought about some questions we could start asking?
Yeah, I think we could survey employees and ask them, what would you need to feel comfortable bringing your whole self to work every day? And learn about those opportunities, or highlight employees who have had the good experiences and share why and what it was that made them feel more comfortable and included, and build on that, take and learn from it and build on it. I think we've talked a little bit about having the voices at the table. um, have a think tank, have diverse voices around the table and say, tell us about the positive experiences and situations, so that we can create more of them. An example of that might be that you have someone, we'll use the differently abled example, that got brought into a situation that they may not have otherwise been brought into and felt good about that. It would prompt then, how do we recreate that? How do we make that happen more often? I'm thinking about someone who might have a language barrier, and what can, if that's one of the barriers, where have people had positive experiences that they were able to overcome that, or feel more included, and how do we replicate that?
So there's another question I want to make sure I ask. So Jeanne, as a Black, Hispanic, Latino man married to a white woman and father to biracial boys, I am interested in hearing about your husband's perspective on this work. Really interesting question.
He was really, really involved in it. He did his DNA a few years ago, and that's when I don't want to take up too much time with this, but that's when we learned and could see in his genealogy where the white European gene on his side was introduced, that enabled our daughter to have the blue eyes that she has. It happened to be when his family was enslaved. And it's one of those things that when we really took a minute to step back and think of wow, what that meant, and where we are at today. It really got him very invested in telling that story and other stories about where we're at. And I include in the book a number of stories about his experiences. He had a situation that was almost identical to Ahmaud Arbery. He lived, Ahmaud Arbery did not. But when we saw that on the news, it just shook us, because he had shared with me a very similar situation that he had had. So he was very invested in the book, and it really has also, like I have thought about the fact that our children are half white, and they have those white experiences that or half white experiences that he'll never get to have. And it's just something that we've talked about a lot. This is so different. Well, not totally different, but it's just that dynamic where you can't look your kids in the eye and completely understand exactly what they're going through. They live navigating two different races who have different experiences in our country.
Well, I want to share one comment from the audience, and that's how powerful this has been for me. I am wowed. And I also want to say thank you so much for not just being here for this interview, but for writing this book and for speaking about your experience, because I think it's going to make a really, really important difference in people's lives. And I'm just really honored to be somebody who first gets to help you put this book out there and launch it for the public. So really thrilled to have you. We will continue these discussions over time. In the Inspiring Leadership community, we have an unconscious bias program, and really hope to help a lot of people think about these ideas in a much deeper way, and how it impacts their management and leadership and the culture of their organizations. So thank you to all of our wonderful participants as well who've been sharing their questions and comments. And we will be back with more of the Leadership Spotlight next month with Anil Sharma from India, who will be talking about leadership in the Indian context right now in the middle of COVID. And so we're going to come back on a monthly basis with inspiring leadership topics and about how we can change the world for the better. So thank you so much, Jeanne. And for anybody who wants to order the book, the link is in the chat. We will also post it in the community so that everybody knows where to go and get this book. And thanks, Jeanne. If you have any last moments to comment, now is your moment.
Well, I just thank you, Carlin. I really, really appreciate this opportunity, and I hope everyone took a little bit of something away with it, and be good to yourselves.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye.